everyone, thanks again for joining us. We are doing another live Q&A here today for Chronicles of Elyria. If this is the first time joining us, let me go ahead and introduce ourselves so that you know who it is that you'll be watching for the next hour or so. My name is Jeremy Caspian Walsh. I go by Caspian on the forums, and I am the owner and creative director of Soulbound Studios, working on Chronicles of Elyria. And I'm being joined today by two of my esteemed colleagues. Over here on my right, I have Vye Alexander. Vye is the executive producer of Chronicles of Elyria here at Soulbound Studios, and on my left I have Soulbound Sierra, who is our technical designer and world builder on Chronicles of Elyria. So over the next hour or so, we're going to be taking questions from our forums and answering them as best we can to help you guys get more information on the tribes that we've been talking about on and off over the last couple of weeks. Interestingly enough, if you are catching up just now, if you're just watching it, it's too late to ask questions on our forums. We have our kind of cultivated list of questions that we're going to be asking. However, if you are watching the live stream, then definitely make sure to keep track of any questions you have, because at the end we will be opening it up to questions from Twitch. So, just to kind of give you an update on the format, last time we did one of these Q&As, we actually tried to split it about 50-50, where about the first half of the time was spent answering questions that we got off of our online forums, and the other half we took live questions from Twitch. We wanted to do that because we wanted to make sure that anybody that had follow-up questions that arose during the answers that we provided had an opportunity to ask them. However, we got a lot of feedback that people felt like there was a lot of really good questions that were already posted to the forums that never got addressed, and that the questions that people had that were follow-ups were a little bit more deep dive and didn't necessarily need to be answered on the live stream. So this time, we're going to actually spend about 45 or 50 minutes doing questions from the forum post, and only about 10 minutes at the end talking about follow-up questions from Twitch. So that should give me more time to address the questions that people have. In terms of how we kind of cultivated the questions this time, we did go ahead and post the forum post yesterday morning at the same time that we put up the Terresque post. And then today, I went through and I took the top 10 voted questions off of the forums based on people's upvotes and downvotes. Now, we know that people have a tendency to go in and get their community members to go in and upvote certain posts because they want to know the answers to those questions, but that's okay. That tells us that that's important enough to at least some subset of the community that they want to know the answers to those. And also the downvotes communicate to us that people felt like they either heard the answer to these questions before, or they were less relevant, or not targeted, or not nearly important. But we also understand that not all the questions that people ask are necessarily upvoted, and that there are other really good questions that either got added late to the thread, because, for example, we just dropped the Weird post earlier today, and so the first couple pages of the forum didn't have questions related to the Weird. So what we did is we took the last 10 questions, giving us about 20 questions of kind of pre-chosen questions that were actually done by Kaizen himself. So he went through and picked out what he thought were 10 really good questions, regardless of whether or not they were highly upvoted or not, for me and us to answer, so that you guys could get really good answers to some of the more difficult and challenging questions. So, that being said, we're going to jump right into the questions, but I wanted to very quickly kind of address the tribes holistically. I'm not going to do an overview or anything like that today. That's probably what we're going to talk about during the next Q&A, but I did want to just very quickly talk about the two tribes that we released this weekend. We did talk about the Terresque and the Weird, and we've gotten a lot of feedback already on those two tribes, which is great. The community has been fairly divisive on them, which for us is actually a good thing. I don't know if it's obvious to the community, but what we did is as we were releasing the tribes, we did it in an intentional order. And ultimately what happened is we released the Naren first, which are kind of the more generic, skill-focused, kind of easy-to-use, more traditional style tribe, more akin to what people are used to in traditional RPGs. And then as we went along, we've actually been releasing the tribes that are more difficult and more complex. And had we actually released the remaining 4 tribes at this point, they would also be further complex in both the play style, the environment they live in, etc. So what that means is that the earlier tribes, there's some resource constraints, there's some trade going on, they have very specific unique elements like the Broodveer, focusing primarily on meat, and the Kipik being vegetarian, but in general, they're more traditional. The most recent ones, as you probably have noticed, the Terresque and the Weird are extremely different from any kind of race that people might have played in a game before, because they focus heavily on culture and more abstract thinking. They require a different approach to playing a game than just attribute bonuses and stats. Like, you really have to get into the mindset of one of those tribesmen in order to understand how to play them effectively. So with that being said, our goal when making these tribes is, with the release of each one of them, to try and target a subset of the player base. We know that not all the tribes are going to be attractive to everybody, and in fact we don't want them to be. Our ideal goal is that each tribe that we put out is attractive to about half the population. You know, if we put out a tribe and 50% like it and 50% don't like it, that to us says we've done a good job of balancing them. And so, you know, as we get into the Elyria Mud phase of development, and as we start playtesting these tribes, we will get feedback from the players, and we'll start to see, you know, what people like and don't like about them, and so we'll make adjustments accordingly. But so far, it's been great, and the fact that the last 2 tribes have been so divisive was actually very entertaining for us. I think some people are getting it and understand why these tribes are unique and what value they add, and others are used to a more traditional playstyle, and they don't necessarily see the value in them yet. But once we get into the game, I think people are going to figure it out. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead. Like I said, I chose the top 10 questions, so these were more or less taken from the top 10 list in terms of their rating. And then towards the end, we will get into the ones that Kaizen added. Because the ones that were most highly rated were the ones from earlier in the weekend, you're not, I think, going to find any questions related to the Weird in the first couple pages. But we should get into the Weird questions towards the end. So let's jump in right away. The first question is from Victoria Rachel. Victoria Rachel asks, the Naren have a 20% increase to the rate of learning new skills, which is a quote from the Naren write-up. What is considered a new skill, and how far into a skill do they continue to gain advantage? That's a really good question. It's not something we spelled out specifically. New skill tends to be skills that people train up to the point of expert or artisan. Beyond that, once you start getting into the master and grandmaster and things like that, they're much more advanced stages. So the Naren have a 20% increase right now up until the expert level. We may play that up to the artisan, we may take that back one more, but beyond that they lose the 20% bonus, because at that point it's not about becoming like masters of all, it's more about like specializing in a specific thing. And while the Naren are really good across a lot of skills, we didn't see them necessarily as being specialists. That's more like the Rothi or the Broodveer or one of the other tribes who generally focus more on specializing in a specific craft or trade and not being very good at like all of them. So there you go.
What about a skill that's new to your lifetime but is familiar to your soul?
That's another good relative question for that. Each time you come into the life, it's a new skill for you, because you got to start back over again and train it up. So each time your character has a skill level that's below the expert level, you'll get that 20% bonus, as long as you're Naren in that current lifetime.
Yeah.
For me, by the way, that's knitting. I just feel like I have an affinity for it.
For knitting?
Knitting?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
You need to show off some knitting.
Challenge
I have
accepted.
to do some knitting.
Yeah.
I totally want to see your
Okay,
knitting now.
well, next Q&A.
All right, knitting, guys.
Knitting.
Speaking of clothing, by the way, I appreciate you guys dressing down for change and not wearing like suits like you normally do. However, you guys are failing at representing, and you're relying on me to consistently wear my Chronicles of Elyria t-shirt.
I think people get the idea.
But I feel like it's all about team spirit. Look like the Weird right here. Like, you guys should be like me, right? You guys should be dressed like me.
Or maybe you should dress like me.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not sure I would look good in your dress style.
You
guys decide. All right, moving on. All right, Gravelord Nido asks, to build off the combat style conversation that happened around PAX, are there any combat styles that are traditionally exclusive to a tribe? Do the Genoan have a primal... This is not one I had on my list, so he reorganized these. That's great. Kaizen thought this one was very important. This is new to me. To build off the combat style conversation that happened around PAX, are there any combat styles that are traditionally exclusive to a tribe? Do the Genoan have a primal style, pounce style, or maybe the Dross have a specialty style with a poison weapon designed to give the poison time to take hold? The plan is yes. Like, we want each of the tribes, not only because their weapons are different, but because their cultures are also different. Speaking of weapon, I was going to wait until we did this later, but this is just, it plays in so nicely. If you read the Weird write-up, you notice I said that the Weird typically use small, like, short-handed weapons and thrown weapons. And they do that because when you're moving around inside of caves and caverns, there's not necessarily a lot of room for, like, long swords and stuff like that. So they tend to use weapons that are close to their body and are more, like, short-range weapons. So
they're also a lot easier to conceal.
They are a lot easier to conceal, which if you're trying to assassinate someone is nice. So Serpentius actually had brought in previous some of his weapon collection. That's a question or a story for another day, I suppose. But this is a weapon that I think is akin to what you would expect to find on the Weird. So if you're taking a look at that, that's great. Over here we have something that might be, while the Teresk are not as militant, that might be something more like what the Teresk would have. It's reminiscent of like an alligator tooth. It's more decorative. They probably have encrusted gems on it and stuff like that because their weapons are often as much for show as they are for actual use. But that gives you something of an idea of what the Teresk might use.
Yeah. And it'd totally be gold.
It would totally be gold. I mean,
Plated.
Well, gold-plated. It's not going to be gold, because then you'd be like, and it would bend, and that would be bad.
that wouldn't work.
All right. So there you go. So yeah, they definitely will have different combat styles, and I think one of the fun things about Chronicles of Elyria, and specifically the way we're doing the combat style, is to be the most effective in kind of the martial arts, is you're going to need to travel and learn those military styles and combat styles. Not necessarily because you want to learn them yourself, but because you need to be familiar with them. And because it's a reflex skill-based game, you need to know what kind of attacks your opponent are going to be throwing at you so you know what to defend against. So the most learned combatants are going to be the ones who do spend some time in each of the tribes learning their different techniques.
Yeah, but there will still be, if you are not of that tribe and you learn their tribal fighting style, you're not going to be as good as somebody from that tribe, probably because the fighting style may take advantage of their advantages. Like if the Genoa, have longer arms,
Strike style.
They're gonna be able to have a bit more reach.
Well, and also just the Kipik trying to use a staff, like that.
Yeah.
Or the Yoru with their
slingshots,
giant bodies and ability to lift heavy things.
All right, moving on.
Just sit on them.
Suslick Wishmaker asks, I think I got that one correctly. Suslick Wishmaker. I think he did Suslick Wishmaker. All right. With the dross burning in the sunnier terrain, can that be negated by wearing more covered clothing such as hooded cloaks or hiding in the shade of a tree? It can. The hooded cloaks are specifically designed to make it so that you can move around in sunnier climates without having the effects of the sun. So dross can move around, they just can't do so without covering.
Yeah.
And that's actually true of most of the tribes as well. Aside from like the Weird, who even in the sunny desert area will oftentimes wear hooded masks and shamaks and stuff just so that they're not faced with the sun, even though they do have some resistance to the exposure.
Yeah, something that you may recall from when we did the survival Q&A a couple of months ago is that exposure is a mechanic, and so that fits with all the different tribes in the different ways that they would have problems with exposure. So if they're from a warm climate, they go to a cold one, that's a problem. If they're from a cold climate, they go to a warm one, that's a problem. If it's sunny or not sunny or
humid or dry,
all of those are going to cause problems for different tribes when they are in those areas. So clothing and other things are going to help mitigate that.
Croatia? If it's Japanese, it has to do with murdering people.
All right, great. So this question comes from Croatia, and it asks, it was stated that there will be 8 tribes available at launch, with Naren being one of them. It was also stated that the Naren tribe is the most dispersed tribe. More specifically, it seems like it would not follow lore to only have them constrained to a single biome type in a small area, as they tend to colonize other areas, with the exception of extreme and exotic biomes. So, will the Naren be available to all kingdoms at launch in addition to 1 or 2 extra tribes, or will the Naren only be available to a single kingdom at launch? I specifically called that question out because I did want to answer that. The way we go about populating the world is by building up the biomes and stuff like that, and then procedurally placing the settlements in the different tribes. But settlements are not necessarily like universally tribal. Specifically with the Naren, Naren will exist in almost all environments and all kind of settlements throughout the region. That being said, they tend to not go into the more deep tropical areas, so you'll find less Naren inside, for example, the Genoa environments. But it's entirely possible to see Naren inside of the Broodveer regions, or seeing even some Naren living inside of the semi-arid desert with the Weird, or even in the wetlands. So, and that's true of not just the Naren; it's true of everybody. I know a lot of people who are watching the stream might be from the nobility and aristocracy, and so they tend to think about things from the perspective of what they're going to do in exposition. But for the majority of players who come into the game, all they're going to be doing is going through the family selection process, where they pick what their family occupations are, what kind of tribe or bloodline they want to be, and then it's going to show them the list of families that are available to them based on the criteria that they specified. And in most cases, for example, if you pick Naren, it's going to give you choices across all the biomes and not necessarily constrained to just the grasslands. That being said, there's going to be the highest concentration of Naren in the grasslands, so you have the most variety there. Your choices will be somewhat more limited in other biomes, but
yeah, depending on how the different the families of different tribes have moved around in the world, there will be opportunities for children of those
Yep.
I think
people.
it can best be summed up with the idea of there's a motherland.
Right.
There's a motherland. There are other places, but there is a motherland.
Yeah.
That is unique to each of the tribes.
And the world isn't just snapping into existence to on launch day or on exposition day. It's not like the world hasn't existed previously. There's been migration, there's been travel, and so you can assume that there's going to be people across the different settlements from varying tribes.
Absolutely.
Corin asks, will the tribes have different technology research options available to them at the start of the game, or will biomes affect research outcome? That's almost entirely determined by biome. We talked about this, I think, in a previous Q&A. The tribes themselves don't have a specific affinity towards technology. Necessity is the mother of invention, and nothing drives necessity more than the environment that they live in. So whether we're talking about boat making and shipwrights for the Teresk, or we're talking about agricultural stuff for the Naren, or various ways to dig and tunnel for either the Harathi or the Weird, it's all going to be driven by the environment that the different tribes are in.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Moonchaser asks, with the Kipik and potentially Genoa up in the trees, what is your vision on parkour and general movement on trees that doesn't rely on infrastructure such as zip lines and platforms? For example, climbing, brachiating through the tree clusters, or swinging on a vine without touching the ground below. If not possible at launch, will trees be designed in a way for it to allow that in the future, or am I over-interpreting this?
That's a good question.
The animators are going to kill me for this, but my vision of the Genoa have always been as you described them. It's swinging on tree branches, being able to jump across them, being able to swing on vines. And this is something that we would not only have in the short term, but long term, if we have, for example, ship-to-ship combat, being able to swing from one ship to the other or something like that. That being said, that's not true of the Kipik, for example, who focus mostly on things like ziplining and ladders. So it does vary. The reason for this is, first of all, that type of movement in parkour speaks to the high adventure that I really imagine for this game, but it also makes the tropical rainforest a very unique biome because it comes with almost an entirely different system of navigation. You're not moving around on flat platforms, you're not moving around on the ground, you're having to jump from branch to branch and swinging and stuff like that.
Right, but the canopy in a broadleaf forest versus the canopy in a jungle are pretty different.
Way different.
So while leaping from, or even just walking across two intersecting tree branches in the canopy of a jungle is a lot more likely than being able to do the same sort of thing in the broadleaf forest. So
Right.
the Kipik would probably want to build more contraptions, more zip lines and things for them to be able to go from
Hanging bridges.
from tree to tree without having to touch the ground, while the Genoa may have more natural paths in the trees.
Yeah. So you read that correctly. That being said, we haven't explored the animation system for that yet. That's something that we're doing later on because we haven't started developing the tropical rainforest biome. But when we get there, expect to see more types of animations like that. All right. Nagash asks, we're on page 2. I think we're doing pretty good on time this time. Nagash asks, will all tribes see and experience the spirit world in the same way, or will there be variations of the spirit world?
I think people have to find out.
Yeah,
That's a good answer.
that's a great answer.
Well,
There
are we
is
encouraging
there
them to die?
even
Like,
different versions of the spirit
is there
world?
even different versions?
Is there even a spirit world? Probably yes. Because
Probably yes.
we've
we've shown videos. All right. That's a great answer to that one. I was going to answer it, but I like your answer better. So
Yeah, it's a better answer.
it is a better answer.
Find out.
Find out.
Find out.
All right. Corin,
And then choose whether or not you want to share that outside your culture.
Corin also asks, when two tribes intermingle, that's a polite term, intermingle, are advantages and disadvantages traded one for one, or is it possible to character with advantages of both tribes?
Ha!
So the
Min-maxing.
great. The way that this works is that each of the advantages and disadvantages that we've talked about either come about due through bloodlines or through cultural things. The things that are cultural typically depend upon what culture you were raised in. So if you are raised in a specific culture, you'll have those advantages. If you're not, you will not. And so as people procreate and have children, they opt which kind of culture the child will be raised in, and that's kind of how they pass those on. For things that are bloodline-based, those typically work off of a genetic system. Each kind of one of these traits have a floating point value, a scale value between nothing and 100%. And as people start to procreate, it will blend those values across and begin to dilute them. So in general, the more pure a specific tribe is, or a specific bloodline, the more impact you gain towards the survival in that biome, and as you start to procreate and intermingle with the other tribes, you tend to get some advantages and disadvantages of both, but never as strong as you would have had you been consistent in your breeding strategy.
Right, like if you, as a Yoru or something, had 100% cold resistance, and then you started breeding with non-Yoru, then you would go down to like 50% cold resistance,
Right.
like within the first generation probably. It would start to dilute, similarly to the way that our bloodlines dilute.
Well, it probably wouldn't be in one generation, because the way that, that was actually one of the things that we talked about before.
It sort of depends on
it
the
depends on
different
which
tribe that you're going with.
Yeah, and ultimately, we know that there's this kind of idea of a regression to the mean, and that over the course of the 10-year story, if we allow a 50% division for each one of them, then people are very quickly going to become a single tribe, and we don't want that. So the way that we are doing it now versus the way we had done it before is that around your parents there is a window, I need to not do that on screen. There's a margin. Yeah, there's a margin. I did the bicycle already.
Wait,
so that's gonna
do what again?
No, sorry. So there is a margin, a window around. Yeah, there's a window around each parent, and so.
Wait, guys, let's all do it.
No.
Okay, now they just look like some.
There is a margin. Because I mean, you guys can be in the GIF if you want. I'm not. There is a window. I give up.
Wait.
You're gonna be more like one parent or the other for several generations, and eventually.
Do you want to do it together?
If you guys need a room or something, feel free.
You might skew more or less towards one of your parents.
Yeah.
It will take more generations than just one for you to reach any kind of midline.
Yeah, it's not always just like straight down the middle. However, there are some of the advantages and disadvantages that could be completely negated
could be.
by a single crossbreeding event.
Yeah, and there are some that are just like stepwise. So like as your height starts to decrease, like if you're a Yoru, your height starts to decrease. At some point, you are suddenly no longer kind of tall enough to be amongst the advantages of the Yoru. And so now you can't use the weapons that you could use before. Or likewise, if you're a Kipik, or Harathi is a good example. You're one of the Harathi, you are able to move into the tunnels and things, but as you breed with Naren or a larger tribe, eventually you get to the point where in one generation you're now too tall
you like
to
hit
walk.
Your head on
yeah,
things.
you now can no longer walk underneath or through the tunnels without having to duck down. And so in those cases, it's a little more binary. Like you'll see a gradual shift, and then suddenly it'll be too much.
Or you're too heavy for the zip lines.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the trees.
In almost all cases, there's something.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
You sink in the wet ones.
Leva.
Cool, I'm on Leva's, yeah. Leva asks, for people with fully furnished manors and villas, back in time you could have choose to have it in full stone, etc. Will this still be the case, or will the manor or villa be very restricted depending upon the tribe you choose? So we actually changed that kind of a long time ago. When we first, very early on, posted the manors and villas, it did say like stone versus non-stone, but at some point we changed that on the online store to be heavy and light. And the idea being that every biome has generally lighter resources and then more reinforced resources that will kind of work collectively or collaboratively in that environment. So actually what happens with the manors and villas is depending upon the biome that you're in, you'll be able to place the building type that you feel is most advantageous for them. So you'll actually get to choose between a collection of different villas and manors, and I recommend you do so with the one that's resources make the most sense in that biome.
I was actually about to ask that.
Yeah.
Which is, are they still restricted by biome resources?
No, we had said we didn't, because some people might actually not realize that the biome that they're in, if they place that down, that's going to be their only villa or manor. So I think what we had planned to do from like a UI, UX standpoint is to let them have a token that's basically, here's your villa mana token, and you go into the store inside the in-game UI, and like you can pick, and it'll tell you like this is the one for this biome, and this is the one for this biome. And so then you plot it down. If you choose to do one that's different from your biome, you can, whether or not it'll sustain as well in that biome.
What you sell.
Right, it's still susceptible to wear and entropy. And if you choose something that is not very suitable for your biome, then
Sorry.
then it'll probably have more degradation quicker.
Just careful of that. Raspberry white mocha up my nose. Okay, now I think you're just fondling me.
I also looked at the camera.
I know. Did you wink at it?
No, but...
All right. McDude asks, strong communications and this is a quote. Strong communicators and negotiators, the Tresk are among the most persuasive of the tribes of man. Similarly, their intuition and ability to read a situation has led them to become virtually impossible to manipulate or fool. That's really good writing. We should commend whoever wrote that.
Yeah, nice work.
That's some nice flavor text, but what mechanics back that up? Okay, this is not the quote. That's some nice flavor text, but what mechanics back that up? First of all, that is not flavor text. A person's character can only realistically be as intelligent as they are, regardless of whether or not their tribe is smart. What mechanics are there that smart tribes can get an advantage over, but more physical tribes can't access? So, let me be clear. Very little of the write-ups that we've been doing on the different tribes is flavor text. In most cases, we're being intentionally vague about how the mechanics work, partially because some of them are still in flux, but in almost all cases, there are mechanics bound to what it is that we're describing. In the case of the Teresk here, what we're alluding to is the different attributes as well as the different skills associated with the social tree. So in the different attribute levels, you good?
Yeah, please continue.
There are 3 dimensions. There's a physical, mental, and social, and then amongst those, there's like the force, the kind of reflex, and then the endurance kind of column. And so along the social tree, there's persuasion, intuition, and leadership, which are core attributes that drive the different skills associated with things like disguises, negotiations, appraisal, really anything that would require you to interact with another person. And so when we talk about the fact that the Teresk are extremely difficult to, let's see, a good quote here,
Impossible to
manipulate or fool. What that means is that if you're using the gossip system, in other words, you're exchanging information as an object in a way and passing that on to another person. Under normal circumstances, somebody could fabricate information and then pass it on to you, and your character, not you, would have very little knowledge about whether or not that information is accurate or not. But under this mechanic, when somebody tries to mislead a member of the Teresk and pass them false information, it is almost virtually impossible for you to do so without the Teresk knowing that the information they're being fed is false. So
if it's being done,
if they have sufficiently high stats,
right? But like if we're just typing to each other,
mechanically,
and you ask me a question and I lie,
right?
We don't.
There's no.
We don't know that you as a player chose to lie.
We can't possibly know.
Right. That's not a mechanic, but there are plenty of other things that are actually mechanical.
The gossip and reputation systems are mechanical systems that allow you to pass information. It's also used inside the justice system. So, for example, this is another reason why this tribe makes really good judiciary, because if you're among the Teresk and you're overseeing like a tribunal or not a military, but a kind of a legal court case, and somebody tries to present false information, then you as the judge would know that, and it would be very difficult to mislead you.
Well, Phoenix, right? Objection.
Right. So there are mechanics. It is not flavor text, and the Teresk are awesome for that reason.
Pro tip, by the way: if we use the word system, it's probably a mechanic.
Right.
Do we use system in there?
We don't. We say.
No. Yeah, it doesn't say system. So it was a fair question.
Damn it! That does sound like flavor text, doesn't it? It's not flavor text. All right. So yeah, there you go. Luminios asks, in the comments of the Teresk thread, Captain states Caspian. Captain
Caspian.
Captain Caspian.
I know, right? That's just white mocha.
What'd you say?
That's just white mocha. I said...
Is there any apple juice in your white mocha?
There is not any apple juice in my white mocha. The physicality of each tribe is not set in stone, and the attribute modifiers we use only determine how easy or difficult it is for a member of the tribe to raise or lower their attributes. With sufficient effort, virtually any tribe, I'm going to underscore the word virtually here before I continue, virtually any tribe can be made strong or physically fit. Their question: does this mean that eventually a Kipik can be as strong as a Broodveer? It just takes them longer to get there. To elaborate, is the strongest possible Kipik as strong as the strongest possible Broodveer?
No.
No
way.
They're bound by their physics.
They're bound by the physicality.
But they can be pretty, you could get a pretty buff.
You could say that the strongest Kipik could be stronger than maybe the weakest of the Broodveer.
That's what I was thinking.
But not the strongest. And that has nothing to do with any kind of hard cap. It has to do with diminishing returns. As your character becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, the amount of effort and work it takes to get even stronger gets higher and higher. And that ramp for the Broodveer is flatter, whereas for the Kipik it's much steeper. And so while they can work extra hard to become stronger than, let's say, the other Kipik, and potentially stronger than an Aaron or something like that, they would have to work impossibly hard in order to become Broodveer strong or Yoru strong. So
impossible is the key word.
Impossibly hard. So no, you will never be a Kipik stronger than a Broodveer.
Right. But like between the Naren and the Weird, which have the same body size,
right.
They're roughly.
Their physique is fairly similar.
Right.
Yeah.
Could a Naren be as strong as the strongest Weird? Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You got to be hitting the gym.
Right.
Hard.
That being said, the Weird do have some advantage over the Naren in terms of their strength modifiers.
Right.
So it is easier. It is easier for a member of the Weird to gain strength than it is for the Naren.
The Weird.
All right. Leva asks, all right, so I think that was the top 10 questions or some variation. It looks like Kaizen did incorporate some from those.
Except for that one that you didn't.
I know, I didn't have anything to do with that one.
Throw it in.
They threw that one. That one's done.
Okay. Throw it.
It's gone.
Put that
all right.
anywhere.
I did. All right, so then let's go ahead and continue on with the other questions. These are the ones I think, for the most part, I haven't seen these yet, so we're doing it live. All right. Leva asks, will you be able to convert a biome into another biome? Is it possible to drain enough water from wetlands to make it temperate, or will with the help from more water, convert an arid area into a temperate region?
No. Like you were saying, and like some people know, a temperate region's more based on the latitude. I mean, there's like cool temperate and hot temperate and different variations, but that's usually latitudinally based. There's not like a water draining mechanic necessarily, or a biome convert. Yeah, just get a giant straw.
Just unplug the drain.
And you just go for it.
I mean, we do have sump pumps in our world. I mean, we do use that for things like recovering wetlands and turning them into like agricultural.
Like Everglades.
But that would be a technology.
That requires, pumps and motors and various other things.
We did a Q&A on biomes several months ago, and it came up something similar there. Could terraforming occur? Right. Could people drastically modify their biome to a different one? So watch that if you have it.
And the answer is the same.
Nope. Yeah, we don't have terraforming in the game. That's actually not a launch feature or anything.
We could at least. Was that all the question? Yeah.
That was the one that was the last one from that one.
Right, but it would potentially be disadvantageous for your tribe to want to drastically change their biome. However, if enough conquest occurred that an area was taken over by primarily another tribe, then they would probably seek to do something like that. But they,
potentially. We seek to be terraforming Mars, and even now we can't do that.
I feel like there are still continents on our planet we could do a better job of terraforming before we go to Mars.
True.
All right, moving on. Loop asks, will you at Soulbound Studios in any way affect our ability to choose a tribe so one tribe doesn't get disproportionate amount of players? And if so, this is the case, then how will you do it? That is a good question. I'm glad that was asked. Yes, we have the ability to do that. Yes, we will be paying attention to that during playtesting and based on feedback, and we will be adjusting the strengths and weaknesses and advantages and disadvantages of the tribes. Right. We do want there to be a roughly equal proportion of all of them. Now, that being said, there are some tribes that we feel like are going to have a higher distribution of players in general. Like the Naren, for example, they have the largest biome. They tend to be the most neutral. We expect to see more Naren than we do some of the other tribes. On the other hand, the Genoa, the Broodveer, and even the Weird and the Teresk, because they're kind of more abstract and high level in their design, we expect to see fewer of them than, let's say, the Naren or the Kipik. But that being said, if we do see a disproportionate number beyond what we would consider a safe normal distribution, then we will be going in and tweaking those to make sure that they are all desirable. We do want each of the tribes to be equally desirable to a degree.
Right, and some of that will be able to be adjusted through the families and which families or tribes those families belong to are located in which regions around the world. So just because you're creating a character in a primarily Naren settlement, there may be a frothy option available to balance that out.
Okay. Definitely asks, in previous discussions about finding new lands, it was said that if you find new land and build on it, it belongs to your kingdom technically. If we discover a new tribe, will they have their own kingdom? Or if we build there, will there be made a part our kingdom and be more of a takeover?
We were talking about this exact same thing.
We were.
Yeah. Well, also I think this was asked similarly like last year.
I mean, this is an expansion question because we know now that there are other continents, and we know that there are other tribes on those continents. So if you were to go and take over or to explore a new continent, does your king become the new ruler of that tribe, or is there likely to be an existing member there?
I mean, I think the answer would be it's likely that they already have their own established set of rules and government systems. It's like the naive imperialist who thinks that you're taking over a group of uncivilized, uneducated people who have no infrastructure. They're a group of people who have managed to survive.
It's fair to say, I'll say this, it's fair to say, this is intentionally vague, it's fair to say that if you go exploring and you find a new tribe, they probably already have an established infrastructure, or even a new settlement. If you find a new settlement,
I mean, if you find a settlement,
it's not like
it's someone's settlement.
It's not like you're in a 4X game and you find a splinter colony and they just immediately join your peoples.
I mean, that happens when I find a group of barbarians or something in Civilization. They're just like, hey, we'll join you.
Right. That's not how this works.
No.
You seem all right.
All right, I think we've answered that. The reality is that they will generally have their own structure, their own form of leadership, and will not automatically join you. They have their own personalities, just like any other NPC.
Unless, if it's part of their culture to immediately join with any other culture.
We are a servile race of people.
So
I get it.
anytime...
So the minions.
Yeah.
Right. Movie minions.
We got a page and a half. Let's see if we can get through these. All right, Sean Bob asks, 2 first names, that's great. Sean Bob asks, do tribes listen to different kinds of music? And if so, how do you as a developer decide which style belongs to which tribe? They do.
I mean,
if you've been reading the write-up, we talk about the different types of music, the different instruments they have, how and why they use the music. As to how we decide what that is, some of it's cultural. It's based on the type of instruments that are going to be available to them in their biome, and then a lot of it is just working with our composer to figure out what's an appropriate theme for the tribe and kind of what kind of music that they would listen to. There's not going to be what we would consider modern or contemporary music, but it will be varying forms of classical or older music.
Shout out to Sean.
Sean Beeson is our composer. Amazingly talented composer.
Fantastically talented.
Super talented.
Super talented.
Incredibly talented?
Super fantastically, incredibly talented.
Right.
All right, I'm very curious to see how this will work for the bards that inspire people through music.
Yep.
Well, there you go.
I think, you know, in a lot of games, if you're playing a bard, you know, one, you're doing party favors, like, everybody's bolstered because I sang a song at you or whatever,
Right.
and they all pretty much sound the same. It doesn't matter what class, it doesn't matter what race you took in that other game.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe there's some confusion about what a bard is in Elyria. Is it somebody who joins your adventuring party and sings at you and you feel stronger, or you feel like you have a shield or something, or you're hasted?
It is not.
Right.
Right. No, it is not. Bards are I mean, there's the bardic skill tree. So bards are information gatherers and hoarders and collectors of knowledge, and people who use that knowledge to do fun things like determine whether or not a document has been forged, or tracking people, and like doing things that somebody who is a kind of a collector of knowledge would be able to do. And they do have tales and stories and music that they can recount, but the music itself to do so often requires certain instrumentation. So the ability to effectively relay, let's say, a Dross legend versus like one of the stories of the Teresk would require different instrumentation and a different number of people to do so effectively, because oftentimes different parts of the piece will be done by different instruments. And so if you, for example, are only a single individual, a bard, for example, wandering around trying to replay one of the tales of like the tragedy of Damon and Selene from the Teresk, you're not going to be able to do it effectively. It's going to require more people, because that's just the way their instrumentation and their music works. Like, they're more operetta in the sense that they want an orchestra. They need lots of pieces to tell their story effectively.
Yeah. A bard in Elyria is a lot more of a social play style, where you're dealing with people, you're mostly in civilizations. It's not like you're going out into the woods and like singing a song at a bear and like it's
But
taking
I encourage you to try that.
and it's taking damage over time because
Not
you're
a bear.
singing at it or something, right? It's
I
not
encourage them to try it.
Go ahead. You
choosing
would.
a bardic lifestyle is not a combat lifestyle
No.
in Elyria.
It is not. All right.
But I encourage you to try.
All
I
right.
mean, you can be a little bit of a fighter.
I mean,
And I
they
shall
do say that
the
music.
songs of your death.
They do say that music soothes the savage beast.
That's exactly right.
Right.
But
So
a
try it.
bear's not going to take damage over time because you're singing at it.
No,
Perhaps it's-
you might take
its
damage over
anger
time
will be
because you're
quelled.
singing at it.
Yeah.
But you might be able to calm it, maybe?
I don't know. Maybe
I mean,
if it was magical song.
Maybe like an Ursifont. I don't recommend trying to soothe the Canis rabbit with a lute. That's not going to work.
I suggest trying it.
All right.
This,
What
you're gonna have to find out.
we should have filtered this, because I cannot say that name.
One.
Yeah.
No. So there's
Why
a
not?
question. Because it's not a nice name. That's probably something we should fix.
Yeah, you're gonna get a name change on the forum.
Yeah.
What-
So
We could Babooker.
yeah, Babooker.
Babooker.
Babooker says, will there be some sort of mechanic in place to hold players accountable to the most serious of core values held by their tribe? This was hinted at in the newest tribe entry relating to Resk and marriage. Will there be some sort of mechanic to hold players accountable to the most serious of core values? Yeah, they'll kill you. No,
No, Teresk. They didn't.
I
say
know,
that.
it's in general. So most of the mechanics where we say these are the value of the people, in a lot of cases there are implicit contracts in place. So being a member of that society, being a part of that settlement means that you're implicitly bound by that culture to do certain things. So violating that is like breaking the law. And so if you do that, the NPCs will interact negatively to you, you'll become taboo, and if it is actually breaking the law for one reason or another, then they will arrest you and take you to trial for that. So again, not flavor text. They will actually do bad things to you if you do that. That being said, if you are careful enough and don't get caught, that's something else. And also, as they say, the only excuse for bad manners is fast reflexes. So if they can't catch you, that's something else as well. But that's true of any tribe. You know, any of the tribes that we're providing information, when we talk about cultural significance and the things that the tribe do and do not like, in most cases that means that the NPCs will interact with you differently if you violate that, and that there are implicit contracts in place. It also could mean that, for example, because it's a violation of implicit contract, that you would get flagged by other players as well. So even if the NPCs aren't around, other players can go, okay, now I have the ability to take and arrest you and bring you in because you violated something that's a cultural law.
Yeah.
All right. Victoria Rachel asks, both the Naren and Harathi are Virtori and believe in the vices and virtues. Are these the same 7 vices and 7 virtues often represented on Earth, or are there any differences? They're very similar. We've made some allowances because the game itself does not necessarily support some of the principles that we do in our world. So, for example, a good one is lust. Lust is interpreted in different religions as meaning different things, whether it's a lust for power or a lust for indulgence. Granted, some of the vices, there's a good amount of overlap in general, but for the most part, they are the same vices and virtues, but adjusted slightly to make more sense within the Illyrian world.
I actually have to go to the bathroom.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Great.
So he's going to exit stage. All right.
Stage right? Yeah.
And if you knock that camera over,
Oh! No, I'm just kidding.
you'd think you would use the bathroom before we came on stage.
I did.
That's right. He has a very tiny bladder.
Great.
You should try playing Dungeons & Dragons with him for 4 hours. That's exciting. All right. Moving on.
That's alright, we don't need him anyway.
Jason, Death's probably like laughing right now because he's seen this. Like, we've gone through periods of playing D&D where like every 15 minutes he's like, okay, I have to stop. And we're all like, it's the middle of a fight. What are you doing? He's like, I gotta go. And then we're all just kind of sitting there like waiting. Everybody's got their weapons up and we're like paused while he's gone going to the restroom. All right. Moving on.
Oh, we can have Kaizen come in instead.
Kaizen's gonna sit in. Would you like to sit in for the last like 5 questions?
Sure, I won't be able to answer any of them.
That's okay.
You
So
just-
we're gonna be, for those of you who haven't seen him yet, this is Kaizen. Kaizen is our community producer, and he's gonna be joining us. So he is the guy that's helping us make sure that the content that's being presented to you guys is high quality, getting more videos, more media and stuff to you. So you guys will eventually be seeing him on more streams as well, because he's got a lot of cool ideas of things to be presenting to you guys that don't necessarily involve myself or our executive producer. So get used to this pretty face. You're gonna be seeing more of it. All right, let's ask the last couple of questions. How are we doing on time, by the way?
Doing great.
All right,
Got
awesome.
15 minutes left.
Cool. So it shouldn't take us too long to get through these last questions, and then we'll open it up to the Twitch questions.
Sounds good.
You'll probably have to go off screen for that, I guess, or
Yeah.
have somebody feed it to us. All right.
We'll make it work.
Veneker asks, tribes and land selection. If one account has 2 counties and places one on each side of the duchy border, either touching or not touching, can the count choose between the native tribes from both duchies at character creation time? So I can answer that one quickly. You can't do that. So if you have one account that has 2 counties, during domain and settlement selection, the 2 counties must be not only adjacent, but they must be within the same duchy. So, not a problem.
Yep.
R.S. Singh asks, communal property...
Oh,
here
this
we get
is a
into the
weird
weird. Here we get into the
question.
weird. All right. R.S. Singh asks, communal property. All Weird of a settlement have access to all spaces and property of the other Weird. There are no access restrictions available. How can I prevent people from stealing my or the community's stuff?
Well, for one, carry it on you, because people can't take stuff off of you. 2, it's only within the settlement.
Right.
And so an outsider or even a Weird from another settlement is not going to be able to come into your house and take all your stuff. Only somebody from your own town would have access in this way. And so it's not just anyone. It's not like some outsider stumbles into your secret cave base and then takes all of your stuff.
Right.
Because they're not a Weird. They don't get that.
Right. So there's a bigger set of questions around here, which is, why did we do that for the Weird? The Weird, actually, like we talked about earlier, are a fairly sophisticated social structure in the sense that the people who play the Weird have to do so with the understanding that there is a larger objective to playing the Weird than collecting stuff. It's people who, through the use of espionage and disguises and spycraft, are subtly pulling the strings of the other kingdoms and domains and settlements. And so
to serve the twofold queen.
Yeah, I mean, to serve the twofold queen. So they all basically dress the same. They all wear the same kind of general drab garb. They all use basically the same single forged equipment. They all, develop a lot of the same skills and trade crafts. So they don't really have a lot of reason to steal from one another because they all basically have the same stuff to begin with. They're not a hoarding tribe. They're just as likely to give the stuff away to another tribe in exchange for information as they are to use that themselves. So you kind of have to approach the Weird not from the perspective of how do I protect my stuff, but more from the what stuff would I care about protecting that the other members of my tribe or settlement would want access to that I wouldn't be willing to give them. Because again, remember, this isn't a game, for those who haven't kind of followed along with our combat discussions in the past, this isn't a game where the equipment that you put on raises your stats. It's not like I put on the plus 300 strength, sort of awesomeness. Equipment is situational. If I'm living in the desert, most all my weapons are going to look like this. There might be higher quality versions of them, which I'm going to keep on me, or there might be some that have different types of alloys on them to make them more suitable for being used while in the water, if I'm terrestrial or something like that. But in general, weapons are more about just having the ability to get access to them in a very kind of paper, rock, scissors. So, am I engaging somebody with the right equipment, and is it of a decent value? So, as a result of that, stuff breaks a lot, it rusts, it degrades. You're going to be repairing your equipment on a fairly regular basis, every couple days, every couple weeks, at least to some degree. And so, equipment in general in Chronicles of Elyria is not as important as it is in other games, because it's a skill-based game, not an equipment-based game. So, that all being said, we recognize that the Weird in particular have a huge set of advantages and disadvantages, and it sways wildly on both directions. On one hand, you have this idea that everybody in my settlement can come into my room if they want to and take something out of my chest. On the other hand, if I'm out in the wild with members of my settlement, our bolstering bonus affects everybody. And when you effectively wrong one member of the Weird, you are affecting all of them. Because remember, we are the Weird. So when you rob from one member of the Weird, you're robbing from all of them in that settlement. And that's true whether or not you're not a member of that settlement or somebody else. Now, you can't really rob from your own settlement, but you can also express that you were unhappy with that being taken, that you were using it, and ultimately you can just kill each other if you want to. But the point I'm getting at is if somebody else comes into your settlement and they find a way to come in and they take from you, then they're going to be faced with the wrath of the rest of that settlement, and all bolstered when they come and find you because they're all family members.
Right, and because they have the settlement hive mind, essentially.
What is this?
You've been replaced.
Where'd you get a
Sozo
coffee?
comes back.
Where'd you get a coffee?
I mean, he went to the bathroom where he got a coffee.
I had to go to the bathroom, man.
All right.
But they can also, like, if you're like, oh, it would be really great, this one special poison that I left back at my house, and you can just, like, tell somebody from your settlement, could you please bring this to me halfway across the world?
Right.
Or whatever, because you have the settlement family chat
right.
to be able to communicate through greater distances and to coordinate much better. So if somebody does, an outsider comes and does steal from the settlement, they've stolen from the entire settlement, and the entire settlement can collaborate and communicate in dealing with that threat.
Right. Now, that being said, this is one of those that we're going to have to play test. It's one of those things that we are very excited about. I think almost all of us are very passionate about the Weird the way they are. We really like that this is a radically different, very divisive play style, and it does require people who are willing to come into a settlement and kind of embrace the communal. But that's the tribe. That's not going to be for everybody. Maybe not even 50%. Maybe not even 1/8 of the players are going to find this tribe to be useful for them. But for those people who do, they're going to be an extremely effective tribe.
Right.
And
it presents a really, visceral, different thing. It's not just the same, like all the tribes are basically just different colors of each other.
Bye, cousin.
It really does change the game mechanic in really severe ways,
Yes.
which is cool. If you're a person, though, who is worried about people taking stuff from you, I would not recommend playing the Weird.
Right. I don't know if this question is asked here or not, but one of the questions that I saw previously was a question about how we expect to stop griefing. How do we prevent people from creating a character, joining a member of the tribe, coming into the settlement, and taking stuff, and then wandering off? And there's a couple things. Number one, much like the rest of our character creation system, somebody in that settlement has to be saying, I want to create a family member. If nobody is saying, I want to create a family member, you don't get to join that settlement. So there is some degree of control over that. But let's say someone does join the settlement. They're now spending a spark of life to come and join that settlement. So they've spent the money, and then they come in and they take whatever items you have, which in general is probably not something super valuable anyways. But let's say they do come in and take something. Because you don't have any guards, you're not trying to stop them, you're not in any way using the item, and it's just left around. First of all, they have to know that it's there and where to find it, which, you know, we're just saying there's no access restrictions. That doesn't mean there's no way to hide objects or other things. It just means that they accept that it's an open community. But they would have to come in, they'd have to know it, they'd have to steal it, and then they'd have to get out without you using your telepathic family chat to tell everybody else, hey, they just came in, created a character, and stole something, and I'd like it back, please. In which case, they can still come and attack them and get that back. Also, there's limited inventory, so you gotta find some way to carry the stuff out. You know, you've only got what's on you, and they, aside from a small number of pack animals, they don't tend to have large trade wagons like the Arache do. And so, you know, there's the logistics of getting the stuff out. And then once they've got the stuff out, you're still a member of the tribe, so they effectively always know if you're in danger where you're at. They're kind of always faced with that family chat, and they always have the ability to constantly hunt you. So, I mean, it's effectively a disposable character at that point.
Plus, the Weird find it totally acceptable to just kill somebody as a way to resolve conflicts.
Right.
So...
Not really the kind of people you want to steal from, for the most part.
It kind of... It would
You're not
be a
gonna get, like,
lot
a court
more
case.
minimal than in other games.
I think people assume that this is really bad, but I think the people who assume that it's bad kind of are not looking at the big picture and the steps it would require to pull that off. Also, if somebody did manage to come in and pull that off successfully, that'd actually be kind of awesome. But that being said, we're aware of it, we're watching it, and we do have ulterior suggestions that we've been working on that would be ways in which to counteract this. So if we do find during playtest that this becomes a big problem and that it's something that does happen repeatedly,
we will take mitigating
steps. We will take mitigating steps, and we already have, I think, what I feel are really good ways of making the spirit of that mechanic and the openness of the community still there without it being such a radical impact. But if we do that, then we also have to scale back on the advantages, which I think takes a lot from the ability for the Weird to work collaboratively. So I would rather not do that if I can.
Yeah, we don't really want to water down the game.
Right.
As much as possible.
It is not about regression to the mean.
Right.
It's about having distinct, unique tribes with different play styles who are attractive to a small 1/8 or 1/10 of the population.
Yeah, fair,
1/12
but not
even.
Yeah, 1/12
fair,
would
but
be
not
ideal.
equitable is really our motto. Right,
But we are aware of it. So.
Vigorish asks, if a Weird settlement has all the perks of a family unit, can the entire unit be reserved for your friends, guildmates once chosen? That's a great question. That goes into the idea that there is this idea of families and child codes and the ability to share your child codes with other people or family codes so that they can join your family. That was actually not something that I had discussed with Heat, but it's something that not with Heat, with Death, and I will get back to you on that, because I do like the idea, since there is this concern of people joining your settlement and not having it be somebody that you trust. But then in the case of the Weird, being able to discover the family codes or child codes of everybody in the settlement, because then you could literally just give them to your friends and be like, hey, come join my settlement, which I think speaks well to the idea of the Weird, which is this very kind of uniform, collaborative group. So yeah. I like that idea, actually. All right, last question I have on my paper here is from Guild's Bounty. He asks, or she asks, on the Weird, we have this line in their disadvantages. The Weird cannot participate in staged battles on battlefields or violate their religious and cultural edicts. What exactly does this mean, cannot? Does that mean it violates their religion and thus leads them to being shunned by their entire tribe? Or does it mean that there is a system-level lock on that character's behavior that prohibits them from being able to violate their religious cultural edicts? Like all things in Chronicles of Elyria, there is always the choice. In this case, it just means that they would be violating the edicts. There is an implicit contract for their culture and religion that they will not fight on a pitched battlefield, which is a system. That is a mechanic where people are able to declare war, and it creates a battle zone. And inside, you just wanted to do that.
I actually want to
You
crumple
just
one
also-
up
you
just
do-
so I feel like
I know we make fun of Miguel a lot for
By looking down.
for pain.
I'm going to look this way.
But you do this.
I know. All right, so there is a mechanic for battlefields, and the Weird cannot fight on those pitched battlefields. Their battle happens before and afterwards, which personally, I love the idea that they will start wars and they will end wars, but they will not participate in wars. That is just amazing. Or at least they have their own war. It's the war that you don't see. So they're
on a different level.
They're on a different level. They just don't come on the battlefield. That doesn't mean that they absolutely cannot.
So.
No. but it does violate an implicit law. So if they are found going onto the battlefield and witnessed by other members of the Weird, then they would have to answer for their actions, whatever that particular law is. And again, those laws are controlled to a degree by the kings, counts, and dukes. So it may be that you're a member of a duchy within the Weird who are less strict on that and have actually relaxed the requirements on that to some degree, or even a count. So there is all flexibility. Remember, guys, this is true of all the different tribes. We're giving you a framework which we feel adds interesting elements of conflict. The tribes are all about conflict and differences of opinion and different perspectives and different religions. But ultimately, what we can establish is only the history and the cultures of the tribes at the moment in which you guys get into the world. And it is absolutely our idea that we give you guys the opportunity to mold and shape the future of the world so that each server is different and unique. And so even Weird amongst two different servers will not necessarily end up with the same implicit contracts and implicit laws as the owners or kind of the rulers and leaders of those individual servers feel more or less comfortable with the different requirements. And so we absolutely assume that some of these are going to change over time. Some of them may change immediately, and that's ultimately up to the leaders.
Yeah. Like, we're just giving you a starting point, and where you go from there is up to you. Where do you go
Like
from
any
there?
good tabletop RPG, we're giving you a campaign world in which to play in, but the stories are largely up to yours. Or up to you. Up to you. Man, I ruined that. Up to yours.
We help you go through.
But
Yep.
the stories are up to you.
All right, so that's the last of the questions, as you can see, that we had here. We're going to take maybe 10 minutes. I know we're going to go a little over, but I don't think you guys are going to mind. So we're going to take about 10 minutes and take a look at some of the follow-up questions that came in through Twitch. So I'm going to hand it over to Kaizen to ask the questions, and then we will do the best we can to answer your follow-ups.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions from Twitch. I think we maybe have like 3 to 4 questions that we can cover.
All right.
Adam Burfoot asks, are you worried that since the Weird have specific mechanical bonuses toward the more deviant playstyle, that these bonuses, when combined with the communal type living mechanics, will result in kingdoms that essentially become a haven for deviants or bandits or anarchy style players?
What? The Weird are like deviant behavior? Could have fooled me.
I mean, am I concerned? No. Did I know that that was going to happen? Yes. You know, it's important to note that we don't feel like the Weird are evil. Like, evil is not something that the followers of the Twofold Queen recognize. They recognize balance. But in a world that's been largely constructed based on order and lawfulness and structure, you know, whether you're talking about the Naren or the Broodveer or the Genoa or the Taresk, having somebody like the Weird in there that makes sure that there is that balance, I think, is very important. So did we know that they were going to be attractive to the more deviant types and that they were going to be using the ability to disguise and the ability to communicate with one another? Did we know that they were going to be doing that in order to disrupt the rest of the world? Yes, we did.
Here's another question. Can the kings overrule the implicit laws that the lore imposes on us?
We just answered that, and yes they can.
Yeah, like if you totally are the king of the Weird and you're just like, nope, this communal property thing doesn't work for us at all. Like, you might be able to put laws in place that undermine that, which would be sad, but you could do it.
Yeah. I mean, again, we're going to play with those things because there are some things that we feel like we want them to change over time, and there are some things that we feel like it's okay to change right away.
Yeah.
And so we will manipulate those. And if, for example, we find that during playtesting that universally everybody that plays Weird gets rid of that rule, that communicates to us that that's not something that we should allow the players to kill outright during launch. It's instead something that we need to revisit it as a mechanic to make it feel like it's something that the players would want to use, or at least half the players or some percentage of the players. So, you know, we actually may give more flexibility even during playtesting in Alpha and Beta and Elyria mode so that we can find out kind of what people tune in on, so that we can increment and iterate on that, because we do want people to come into launch feeling like the rules and the cultures that we've established for their tribes are valuable and viable and are playable. But at the same time, we do want to give players the control they need to build the domains and settlements that are specific to them. This is your world, not ours.
Yeah, but we also want to help you not make it just be a vanilla, same as every other game kind of world. We want to encourage you, the players, and the community that we have here, to push yourself and to try something different and to push the genre forward and to maybe make yourselves uncomfortable for a little bit in order to explore what it is to be a good person or a bad person, or the interplay with, you know, other societies and stuff like that. It's an opportunity to tell really interesting stories.
If we just wanted a game where there were like races that had different attributes and looked different, we could do that. The time and energy that we're putting into the mechanics that make these tribes culturally difficult to play and different from one another are intentional. We want you guys to stretch yourselves. We want to have those hard conversations. You know,
Drama.
I mean, for all practical purposes, the Weird practice eugenics. I mean, they want every member of the tribe to look the same, to behave the same, to dress the same. That is a hard pill to swallow. But for those people who embrace that idea just for the purpose of role playing, it's going to be awesome. Like, I personally think the Weird. I mean, every time I work on the design of one of these tribes, at least for the duration that I'm working on them, they become my favorite tribe. But even after having completed all of them, the Weird are still one of my favorite, I think.
I like the Weird. They're cool. I like all of them. But yeah, I mean, I think that's also just because we try and make them good.
Right. I mean, you each one of them have their own unique facets.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Kaizen.
Tigan CZ asks, how will players be punished for not following their tribe lore if they live in a full PC settlement community?
Yeah, like if so, there's no NPCs to glare at you or treat you weird. Everybody there is just a PC, but you were a Taurus and you got divorced.
Right.
You know, like there's no NPCs around to be a jerk to you. It's just other players. Well, that'll just be up to the players.
Right.
Culture changes. That's a culture thing. And like, if it's not an implicit contract and it's just a part of the culture that we establish through lore or through our design journals, and that's open to change potentially over time. Because all cultures do evolve and all cultures do change some way or another, both great and small.
I do want to take this opportunity to emphasize, though, that the rollout that we're doing with Chronicles of Elyria, spending all this time in advance, letting you guys get familiar with the tribes, not only is that to help you guys pick the kingdoms and domains and stuff that you ultimately want to end up in, but we go much further than that with Elyria Mud and Exposition. And it's kind of a gradual rollout. We're bringing more and more players into the world. First we bring in the kings, and then the dukes, and then the counts, and then everybody else. Our reasons for doing that are not just mechanical. You guys, the kings and the dukes and the counts, the nobility and the aristocracy, are the ones that ultimately guide the culture of your societies. I mean, you guys literally are the leaders of your society. And so what we want to see you guys do, instead of, you know, heading to Discord and conversing and talking about how the culture is never going to be enforced and, you know, nobody is going to actually play this way once the game begins, we want you to wholeheartedly embrace the idea of these tribes and get behind their cultures. And if you don't like the cultures the way they are, give us feedback, help us improve, because we want you guys to enter Exposition with the idea that when the players actually come in on launch, you guys will have established the groundwork for what that culture will be and will enforce it. You know, we want you guys to lay that work. That's why we have you there in advance. Otherwise, we would just put everybody in on launch day, and then you're right, there would be no culture. People would immediately play the game the way that they always would. But when you guys, as the mayors and barons and nobility and you know, the kings and counts and dukes, when you guys reprimand people for violating the culture, when you take the time to go out and arrest them and punish them and things like that, then you set precedents for what the expectation is. You create the stage in which the other players will perform on. And I highly encourage you guys to do that. It is yours to do. I think people who back the game at this point, and our backers, are looking at it from what advantages that they can gain from being in the community early, but you're missing out on the opportunity to really make it your world and your game. So leverage that. You know, remember that it's yours to make and craft.
Yeah, like try to find a tribe that resonates with you, but then at the same time, the culture will evolve and change as the players do.
In terms of finding a tribe that works well for you, I know that there's been a lot of comments and feedback on the concept art. It's important to note that the concept art we work on is multi-purpose. We use it for different things. And so a lot of these concept arts we've had are put in to give you guys a representation of one member of the tribe or another. Not all tribesmen look the same, except for the Weird. I should probably preface that. There will be various facial structures and modifications and customizations, and there are varying skin colors, and you know there are sliders that you can use between your parents in order to determine whether you want to be lighter skin or darker skin, and if you're
how muscular
you are. Well, that's more done by player customization, by what you do. But you know, there's some manipulation around height and other things that you can do. But the idea is that don't look at the character art and assume that my character must look like this. Get a general idea of what the character is going to look like, and then recognize that during character customization you'll have an opportunity to tweak those values to one degree or another. But I do highly recommend that you focus on the tribe holistically. Think about what the play style would be for that tribe, and imagine whether or not that's how you imagine your character would be. And like we've said before, you know, this is a true role-playing game in the sense that there are infinite number of metas that you can create. So think about the role you want to play. Do you want to play a more diplomatic character? Do you want to play an assassin type character or a hunter-gatherer? Do you want to play, somebody who, swings from the trees and stalks their prey? Like, figure out what kind of character role you want to play and then find the tribe that matches. And I'm pretty sure you will find it. Okay, guys. Well, that's all the time we have today. I think we've kind of covered everything. There is one more Q&A coming up, part 4 of this. We don't have the list of questions for that, obviously. We will be letting you guys ask holistic questions around that. I don't know yet whether or not we plan to release the remaining 4 light tribe bios on the 4 tribes that will not be available by the next Q&A. Ultimately, we will provide those to you guys well before launch, but it's far less important because you won't be able to choose them as part of settlement and domain selection. So we may actually release that information in piecemeal and kind of use it to kind of flavor what's going on with the rest of the tribes. So
yeah, I kind of prefer personally that the next Q&A really focus on the 8 tribes that are going to be there at launch, so that people can continue to dig deeper and deeper into the questions that they have, instead of asking about a bunch of stuff that sort of like doesn't matter. Yeah. It's just like too much theory crafting.
Yeah, and also the last Q&A that we did, there was a book of really good questions that I pulled out, and we didn't get a chance to answer all of them. So it might also be good for Kaizen and for the outreach team to go through and take a look at some of those past questions and just make sure that they're good, and we can bring those in as well. So what we might also do is just go ahead and post a link to the previous 3 Q&A sessions and let you guys go in and upvote them again. And then we can kind of identify which ones we did ask and which ones we didn't, and maybe get a chance to incorporate those into the next Q&A. Or let you guys do it. That's better. Have you guys go into the past Q&As and just pull some of those out that you got a chance to ask before but that were not answered, and copy them into the new kind of part 4, and we'll plan to go back and answer those.
We can create a new forum thread for part 4, and then let the community have at it.
But during that part 4, we will also be going ahead and talking about an overview of them. We will briefly go over all 8 tribes in just a minute or 2 on each one of them, so that you guys are familiar with what they are. So I'm about to close out, but before I do, I know that there are several of you that were looking for the State of Elyria update, which I'll be doing. It's a work in progress. We're right now waiting on some really cool videos and deliverables from the team so that I can piece that together so you guys can see what the state of Chronicles of Elyria is right now during the development process. So once I have those assets and we've got the videos created, then I will hand it off to you guys, and I look forward to getting your feedback and sharing with you really where we are right now in the development of the game and how far we've come. So, thank you guys for joining us again for another live Q&A of Chronicles of Elyria, this time part 3 talking about the tribes, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.